Okay, live now, and I need to.
Let me mute myself, my phone and all that stuff.
All right, sounds good.
Boop. There we go.
And, should I open that up in a different tab?
By the way,
Drag
I've
this
got my
over.
microphone over here if you need it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Does it sound like really far away, or does it?
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. No worries. I got a lot of good post-production stuff going on here, so no worries. All right, so this is Trent Knox Show, episode 66 with Kennedy Phillips. Hey, Kennedy, can you say hello to the viewers?
Greetings, acolytes, and hello, Trent. Thank you
Awesome,
for
thank you.
help.
So Kennedy and I got an acquaintance through one of our mutual connections, Steve Joyner, and he suggested that Kennedy come on the show. He talked about his show, Magnus Elgar. I was able to watch the first 3 episodes over on YouTube, and I can tell you it's one of the most creative audio fantasy comedies I have ever heard on any platform, let alone YouTube. So, Kennedy, can you kind of tell us your background? How did you get into the entertainment industry?
I actually started by going to college.
Okay.
When I was really young, I really wanted to make movies or cartoons or something like that. I knew I wanted to be an entertainer. Um, Problem was with cartoons, I couldn't really draw, so I honed my skills in other departments, specifically post production,
Mm-hmm.
for editing and sound design, and found that it was much more up my alley. So when I went and got my bachelor's degree in cinema studies and eventually pushed over to get my master's degree in film production and learned a lot of skills about editing and sound effect design and Foley art and the like. So I did a lot of freelance, and as time went on with that freelance, I started getting more and more antsy because so much of the work that I was doing was not quite on the scale that I was looking for. It wasn't quite the particular brand that I wanted to do.
Okay.
So I found out that that audio dramas were still going really strongly, thanks to a couple of colleagues of mine at my college. And I realized that, well, with the sound design skill set I have and the team that I'm regularly associating myself with, it could actually be pretty easy to make something.
Mm-hmm.
So I put down some funding for myself, set aside a nest egg to invest into it, and turned out it was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. It took a while because I had to do that while also doing my day job. I couldn't really pay myself to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't expect anybody else to pay me to do this because they had no idea what I was going to create.
Mm-hmm.
Then when it came out, we got nominated for a bunch of things. We've been going pretty strong, and we're looking to try and get more people to listen to it because we know it's got something good there.
Awesome. You talked about you went to college. Where did you go to college?
Say that again.
Where did you go to university at?
Oh, I went to the University of Central Florida for my bachelor's, and I went to
Okay.
Chapman University for my master's.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've always heard good things about Chapman and the film department over there.
Yeah, if you don't know anything about Chapman University, the one thing that they probably want you to know is that they're the guys that helped teach the 2 guys that eventually made Stranger Things.
Mm. Mm. That's incredibly impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so where'd you grow up? What created this in you?
Well, I was born in Pennsylvania, but I moved away from there at a very young age
Mm-hmm.
to Florida. I lived
Mm-hmm.
on a boat for about 12 years and spent most of my life in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it wasn't until I got out of my it wasn't until I got out of my bachelor's that I moved to California to pursue my career in film
Mm-hmm.
and the like. Um, I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to be sticking around here,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a home here now, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a pretty stable living for a little bit, at least as long as I can afford it.
Yeah, it's extremely expensive to live out there in LA, and you're blessed to be able to have these opportunities and do entertainment industry type work. Um, so what was your first uh, foray into the entertainment industry?
Now, in terms of like paid work or just for funsies work?
Both. What was the first project?
All right. Well, the first one where I actually started showcasing it to everybody was about 11 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
where I and four of my friends worked together. In a Pokemon parody.
Oh, cool.
It was back when the big age of like Pokemon Abridged was, or like the Abridged series was getting really big, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged, Dragon Ball Z Abridged, all of them when they were starting out.
Mm-hmm.
We were there making our own abridged version of Pokemon. And we only did one video because it was back when the voice actors were changing hands from the
Mm-hmm.
originals that we grew up with.
Mm.
And we figured that we could do a better job, and it turns out that we did, because we submitted it to a competition at MegaCon, and we ended up winning our the dubbing competition. We didn't end up pursuing another episode of it because we were just kind of like distracted college students doing our own thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. I think, and you said your first bachelor's degree was in what again?
Cinema studies. I
Cinema
also
studies.
took a minor in creative writing because I tried getting into the film program at not University of Central Florida, but
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't accept my credentials because I had my short films that I made, but it was like with a crummy high 8 camera, and I didn't really have a lot of editing prowess aside from like a few music videos that I did on Pinnacle Editing Studio.
Oh,
But
cool.
it turned out that UCF was at the time ensconced in avant-garde filmmaking, and
Mm-hmm.
I hated that crap. I hated that so much.
Mm.
I felt it was really pretentious, and almost everybody there was so full of themselves about what they wanted to do. Like, I wanted to make this film about an orange to represent the non-denominational society that we have wreathed ourselves in.
So there's a lot of at UCF. There's a lot of theatrical filmmaking, and it was more avant-garde.
At the time when I was there,
Mm-hmm.
most of the teachers there were avant-garde filmmakers, or at least people who had that relationship with avant-garde filmmaking. At least in the cinema studies department and the film production department, I never got to see much of what was there, even though I tried really hard to get myself in there a little bit. I did get to work on a couple of films while I was there,
Mm-hmm.
but most of my work that I did that I was proud of was honestly all the stuff I did for fun.
Yeah, that's kind of the same way the same sentiment I had for film school. I went to the University of Hawaii, and most of it wasn't, actually making films. It was mostly screenwriting that I participated in. A lot of screenwriting classes, and that was primarily what was offered at that university throughout the course of my attendance there. So I took mostly screenwriting courses, some production courses and whatnot. But yeah, it is for those kids out there that are looking to go and get a bachelor's degree or something like that. It is something to consider if you're a artistic person, or if you're going to want to pursue the craft, right? So what made you what made you want to go and get your master's at Chapman after getting your?
Well, once I did cinema studies,
Mhm.
I tried applying for a couple of jobs in Florida and found that most people kind of turned their nose up at my degree.
Mhm.
Um, it was also that I didn't feel competent enough to
Okay.
start and try to make my own things. I didn't have much on-set film experience.
Mhm.
I had almost no sound design experience. Like almost all of my sound design experience was just by myself in my own setting with my own recordings.
Mhm.
Um, and that was not enough, just not enough in any way.
Mhm.
So what I ended up having to do was I basically ended up saying I'd like to go a little bit further, and I ended up finding Chapman had a really good film program, and
Mhm.
it was in California, and I knew that if I went to Chapman, I'd run into a lot of people who were going to be going into the industry immediately, taking this seriously, and they would all have their own variations of connections and the like, which I had none.
Mhm.
So I went there, met some absolutely wonderfully talented people, and Chapman did not screw around. I made
Mhm.
about 13 short films while I was there.
Mhm.
Um, about six of them were like 45 minutes in length or
Wow.
somewhere around that region. And I was proud of quite a few of the projects I worked on. I've got like the one of the posters back there, the one that's completely glossed over by sunlight right now.
Mhm.
I got nominated for best sound design for,
Mhm. Mhm.
which was one of my prouder moments, at least
Yeah.
up until I got nominated for best original work for Magus Elgar.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really cool. So, did you get the inspiration to take the the audio shows? I don't. I'm probably not using the proper terminology here, but the audio dramas to a next level because of the film that you did in Chapman.
Well, my relationship with audio dramas started
Mhm.
really early at UCF, where a friend of mine introduced me to a podcast, to an audio drama called Professor Nebulous.
Oh, okay.
It was on BBC Radio 4 at the time, and it was a parody of Doctor Who. And
Wow.
I
Okay.
loved it. I loved every second of it. It was witty. It was sharp. It played very heavily on puns. I took a lot of inspiration from that particular tone,
Mhm.
where all the characters just seem to be having fun at
Mhm.
any given time, including what was it? Harry Hayes, who is this like hideously deformed man in a wheelchair, in a hover chair, who
Mhm.
can only communicate by screaming.
Wow.
Um, but I ended up thinking back on that when I started contemplating about trying to make my own show of like, well, what do I want to make? And I didn't want to make a sci-fi because I felt like I'd be snogging on Professor Nebulous a little too hard if I did that.
Okay.
Mm, and I eventually came up with Magus Elgar,
Mm.
which was about at the time I was just thinking, well, what if you took a lot of the aspects of Merlin and made him more like Doc Brown in that he's like excitable, he's all over the place, and
Yeah.
he's not entirely trustworthy.
Mhm. Yeah. I was listening to the third episode. I don't want to give too much away, but
Oh no, please go ahead.
it
The
reminded me a lot of Rick and Morty, like the whole character of Magnus being like kind of like Rick, and kind of having some of the best intentions, and also sometimes just like sporadic kind of things going on.
but therein does lie one key difference between Rick and Magus Elgar is
Hmm.
that Rick is doing all of his things to self-medicate himself with booze and whatever drugs he can get his hands on, and
Hmm.
trying to mask his misery with his intelligence. Magus Elgar is the equivalent of a 6-year-old who just found out that he could light fire with his fingertips and wants to show everybody,
Yeah.
regardless of how safe that is.
Yeah.
He's not like malicious or he's not nearly as malicious as you might think he is. He's just a kid at heart that wants to show off all this stuff, and he is so focused on trying to show how amazing magic is that he is completely ignorant of how irresponsible he is.
No, I think the dynamic between Magnus and I'm sorry, I can't remember the secondary character. His name is
Magus Elgar and Udo Malaki, his apprentice, Dr. Gra Horatio, the scientist from another dimension, and Kaylee Fawn, Dr. Horatio's apprentice.
Yeah, those two is great. And who are the voice actors for Magus and for the apprentice?
Udo Malaki is voiced by Christopher Moore, who's a good friend of mine.
Okay.
Who I took direct inspiration from him because he has that flat affect voice that I really like. And Magus Elgar is voiced by William Biolenis, who lives up in Canada and is an absolutely wonderful human being. I had the pleasure of meeting him in New York last March for the award ceremony for the best original work.
So, how did you direct or cast the characters for this audio fantasy?
Well, I didn't have a lot of experience casting aside from like a couple of small bits that I did for Chapman University's practice films for their short films. But I ended up finding a website called voices.com, which allowed me to set up a lot of my stuff. Voices.com has a lot of really high-profile customers. I know that Five Nights at Freddy's gets all of their voice actors from Voices.com, among other things. And at the time, they signed me up with an expert casting director who was able to help me find what I was looking for, and I made like this massive document of like paragraph upon paragraph of what I was looking for the characters, gushing about these roles, and I ended up getting 800 auditions.
Wow, how did you have the time to look it over?
It was a lot. Like we had about 12 roles to fill, and the casting director was nice enough to help me narrow down quite a bit and like filter off a lot of the roles that he knew wasn't going to make it. And he narrowed each of them down to about 60 each.
And
that
so, about how many people are on the crew?
Well, on the crew, let's see. For Magus Elgar itself, for season 1, we had quite a few people. We had myself, which was doing almost all the sound design, editing, directing, so on and so forth. We had about 8 to 10 voice actors. We had 2 to 3 sound designers, and we had 1 final mixer and 1 producer. So all told, about 20 people at most. And most of them would pop in, do a little bit, leave, and I was kind of there for the entire process, which was a bit of an undertaking considering I had to do my own day job as well. So it took us a while to get off the ground.
Okay. And what were you the only screenwriter, or did you also have editors?
I had 1 co-writer who would write. He wrote maybe about 2 episodes, the first drafts, and then I'd go in and I would get my grubby hands all over it. And I had 1 proofreader who's now our head of story.
Oh, okay, nice.
And she really helped me get what I wanted, the story I wanted to tell, really focused. Because I know one shortcoming about myself as a screenwriter is that I have a lot of flavor. I know that I'm fun, I'm engaging, that I've got like really snappy dialogue and really entertaining prose, but sometimes I get so excited about that I lose a little bit track of where I want to go with the plot.
Yeah.
And I can meander a little bit or lose track of where I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes off as a little clumsy. And my proofreader, she was very good at helping me, being like, no, reeling me back in every time I started straying from the path.
So how did you, when you got the cast together, did you guys do table reads, or how did you get it to where they're so cohesive? And
we divided it up into two portions. One was that we had about 5 actors who were able to get local.
okay.
Kellen Goff, Brian Stavali, Randy Nazarian, all of them were able to come into our studio to record and get those lines out of the way. But what we would do is that we would have somebody in the room reading beside them with the energy that we were expecting. Like I've done a lot of voice acting. My co-director at the time, Andrew Cornell, had a lot of energy to project with them, so that when we would say these lines, these actors would be just so into it. They would really enjoy it. Otherwise, people like Sandra Espinoza, who played Kaylee Fawn, William Biolenis, who played Magus Elgar, they lived way too far away from us to be able to record lines in person. So what they would do was they would come to us by sending recordings, and they would do pickups and adjustments and so on and so forth. And then I would call them and do like a directed session on occasion if we needed something really specific and we needed to hit the point really well. And they're professionals. They know what they're doing. They've got great recording studios. We were able to piece it all together, and you can't really tell that it's just a bunch of single person in a recording booth fragmentary passages. But that's kind of how you do a lot of voice acting for cartoons. It's very rare that you run into like your ensemble cast standing in the same room together, especially for smaller budget productions.
Yeah. Something I was just thinking about was, did you ever have a time that, you know, someone went off script, but it was unique enough to add it to the show?
Yeah, actually. There was a bit where Magus Elgar was Magus Elgar. We actually had written in to his character that he has these things called scrambled aphorisms, where like a lot of common phrases and stuff would get messed up because he literally has a magical dragon bone plate sewn into his skull. Or is it more like this side? Yeah, it would be this side. And at one point, he ended up flubbing a line so badly. I just ran with it. Like you actually hear it in the first episode, where I was trying to get him to say opticalistic outlook, when the character is, what he means is optimistic outlook. But he was trying to, he knew that it was supposed to be optimistic outlook, but he was like, sorry. I'm just no, that sounds right. That's fine.
Yeah, I think that you know, things like that happen organically can really, you know, add to the flavor of the original screenwriting. You know, because the actors, you know, take on the personalities of the character, and you know, take it to a different place that you wouldn't normally think it would go. So
the probably one of those moments where that was the most fun, at least personally, was I did get to do 1 or 2 roles in the show.
Okay.
And one in particular that I had the most fun with was the Great Fantavar in episode 5. I walked into that recording booth having no idea what I was going to be doing for the character, and it just kind of came out naturally when I started speaking, where I presented myself as this like farmer yokel type of guy who got his hands on this magical artifact and figured he could make a living swindling people into thinking he was a magus of some kind. And when the voice that ended up coming out was kind of like this cross between like if Dudley Do-Right was born in Tennessee or something like that, and he was like, "The great Fantivar wants to make sure that you could speak to the dead."
Mhm.
And then when he kind of drops the role, he kind of sounds a little bit more down in this region.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun because at one point I had to make it sound like I was eating these little chicken nuggets made out of dinosaur meat, and his mouth was full for like a good portion of it, and I had to put a Milky Way in my mouth. It was either a Milky Way or a Snickers, but the idea was that my mouth was full of caramel, and as I was trying to speak the role, I would start choking on the caramel.
That's funny. That's
Because it would
unique.
start like trying to go down my throat, or like it would start coming out of my mouth, or you'd hear like a as I try speaking.
Yeah.
Couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah, that's funny. So with the character development over time, did anything like what is the emotional problem that that Magus Elgar has, and what is he trying to like overcome as a character?
Well, at first I didn't have a lot of weight to the story. I just wanted to make it as a vessel for being able to say some silly puns and do some silly things, and it being just kind of this standalone fun thing where I just wanted to entertain people. Because I don't really have much attachment to dramas personally. Also because I don't want to bum people out. Like I know that there's enough going on in the world that you can get bummed out from plenty.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I am immune to making drama. I have a couple of dramas in mind later on in the future down the road that are going to be really fun with my own spin on things. But for Magus Elgar himself, he started off as just like this excitable kid who's going off on his journey and showing off magic and finding the coolest bits out there. But then he had Udo to take care of. He's had a couple of apprentices before, but they've all died in horrible ways. And Udo's very different from Magus because not only does he have a lot of potential in him, but he hails from this really dangerous family sorcery line called the Malakis, where at one point the Malakis used to rule everything. And then after a couple of generations, they lost their power. And most of them are farmers now. So Magus is sort of starting to learn what it means to be a responsible adult in the presence of somebody else who really needs that guidance. And you start to see, like, as time goes on, Udo gets increasingly frustrated with Magus. And eventually it comes to a head where Udo tries going off on his own. He tries to do at least one mission without Magus and finds out that it's not so simple. And when Udo starts finally getting into situations where he's in danger, like real danger, Magus starts kind of sobering up and starts realizing how irresponsible he's been. I don't want to give away where that ends up going, but as time goes on, Magus kind of has to deal with two things. One is that, you know, he's dealing with Udo, and that he wants to show a world of magic to somebody who emphatically has no interest in being a caster. Because Udo doesn't like magic. He doesn't really enjoy it as much because he knows that it's probably going to get him killed, and it's probably going to be some kind of thing that's going to add more stress to his life. But Magus has been trying to win him over by showing, like, look at how cool all of this stuff is and all the things you can do with it. And you do catch glimpses of that with Udo, where, like, he does get curious, he does get interested, but he mostly just wants to not die.
Yeah.
You know, the other side of it, we hinted at this a little bit, and we may hint at it a little bit in the future, But when Magus was very young, his mother was a caster and wanted her son to not get involved with it because she knew how dangerous, how reckless, how out there it was. But he loved all the stuff that his mom did so much that he kept trying to learn magic anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's gone, and he doesn't know where she's gone, what's happened to her, but he wants to also be a magus that she would be proud of, to show that, hey, look, I could actually figure this out.
Mm-hmm. So I imagine that's going to develop more into season 2.
A little bit, yeah.
I wanna go back and kind of build some more foundation for those of you who are, interested in what's going on in this podcast, listening online or seeing the live video. The world that Magus and Udo are from is called Hearth, right?
Yes, the magical world of Hearth. It's a banana-shaped planet that we call a planetane.
That's very clever.
Puns,
Yeah.
At some point, someone's going to deck me for some of this wordplay, I swear. Because I came up with that pun and I laughed for like a good 45 seconds because I'm a loser.
Those are the best ones, man. The ones that last the longest. I'm gonna remember that. I'm gonna remember that now that you said it.
Because you don't want to say the world of Hearth anymore. You want to think about the planetane of Hearth.
Yeah.
Because you know exactly what that is.
Yeah. So, you come from the world of Hearth, and some of the magic that comes from is devised by elements. Am I correct on that?
The elements are representations of concrete and abstract concepts. Everything from fire and earth to hatred and food comas.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're some of them are very nebulous in concept, they kind of blip in and out of existence as they become more certain and less certain. It's kind of like think of a pantheon of thousands of lesser gods,
Mm-hmm.
where the fact that they exist is solely dependent on anybody remembering. Not to say that mortals have a lot of say in what happens with those elements, but there are things in the world of Hearth that are much more grounded, that are a little bit more reliable. Like the element of fire is probably not going to blip out of existence anytime soon, because fire is such a common staple in Hearth,
Mm-hmm.
for one. But then the element of that feeling that you get when you wake up in a cold sweat in the morning from a dream that you can't remember, probably not going to stick around as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so some of this stuff you can to get the backstory or the understanding of Magus Elgar and the world that he's from can be found through visual storytelling now. What was the process or the conception of maybe producing a cartoon or animation that runs alongside the audio drum?
Well, we made an animated short because the one complaint, or rather the one criticism I got from this show more than anything else, was every single person said this needs to be a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
It would fit really well as a cartoon.
Yeah.
It would be really strong for that. And I said, that's a very good point. I would love to make this into a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat down, I drafted up some ideas for something conservative, really reserved and focused, to talk about to show little pieces of the world of Hearth in a lot of entertaining ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I came up with Magus Elgar Bridge, which is just a short animation about Magus and Udo, or Magus Elgar and Udo going to deal with a troll underneath a bridge by sending another troll after it. And that process took a while. I teamed up with a couple of people from Has Been Hotel, which is another animated short that's that I think is going to be going live in October.
Mm.
They've got like hundreds of shorts online right now about it, and it's great. Like the team has been absolutely wonderful, and they've been focused so much on trying to make this a reality. And we're eventually going to try and pitch it to some places, but it's
Okay.
going to be it's going to take a while because pitching for cartoons is really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the best ideas that I've seen out there never get circulation.
Mm-hmm. So for season 1 of this, it's going to be a redistribution of season 1, depicted with animation. Is that?
Oh no! This is going to be what we're planning on doing is we are retelling the story in an animated format. So we have subtle differences in the storyline. We
Okay.
want to make it so that um, we're not just repackaging season 1
Mm-hmm.
into a cartoon.
Okay.
Because it kind of makes me think about Spaceballs, the animated series, where like the live action version was plenty fine, and
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like that they were just recycling all the jokes for a cartoon. It just didn't
Okay.
gel well for me.
Right. Yeah.
So, like an example of this is that we're working on a animated short called Lizard Cheeks, which
Oh, okay.
we're retreading a particular scene in episode 9 where they meet Magus Elgar and quite possibly one of our more unique locations, Panorama Tower,
Mm-hmm.
which is this Magus's tower stabbed into a giant dead Nebeluga whale that's now floating around Hearth like a giant hot air balloon because its float sacks reactivated and it's trying to break atmosphere. He does weather reports up there, so he's happy.
That's super funny. So, all right, this is going to be season 2 coming out, and it's going to be the audio portion of the series, or the world of Magus Elgar is going to be separate from the story that's told with the animation. Are the voice actors going to be changing, or are they going to stay the same?
I'm going to try very hard to keep the voice actors that I have because they're all very good, iconic, and recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
Now we'll be doing like some subtle differences in the storyline for season 1 and season 2. Like some small bits here and there will be different because you can't really tell the same story from an audio drama to a cartoon and expect it to translate well.
Yeah.
So we'd be rewriting the scripts where like maybe some premises will be the same, or we'll come up with some ideas that would only really fit in a visual medium. But the story will, like the route that I want to go with the story will be quite similar, where there is a particular series of events, the broad events that I want to stick.
Mm-hmm.
The main villain in season 1, the main villain in season 2, the main villain in season 3. I want to keep those relatively consistent
Mm-hmm.
between them because I've got a very interesting idea that I want to do with them that could challenge the very nature of the story pretty hard. But ultimately, what I want to do is I want to discuss and want to explore what it means to be a creative.
Okay.
Magus Elgar is an allegory for having that creative drive and not knowing what the hell to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because for our show, magic is kind of like that spark of inspiration you get when you write a book, when you come up with a script, when you draw something. And a lot of that really comes from provoking an emotional response from things outside of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
and it's not always safe. A lot of times you are putting your own self-esteem on the line, you're putting your own integrity on the line, and you might upset some people depending on what you end up making.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fragile people in the world, and sometimes them reading your story can wreck them in ways you hadn't possibly anticipated. But that's kind of the risk. That's the challenge that you have to yourself, to be responsible and handle that with a level of maturity and ultimately respect, so that you can share that experience with people, because ultimately you're making something absolutely wonderful that is wholly unique to you, and no amount of lack of self-esteem, apprehension, or fear should prevent you from being able to express that.
So, that's very powerful. I think that a lot of people out there who are, struggling with maybe anxiety or fear of producing something and getting it out there for an audience to look at would would uh, would greatly benefit from those words. Um, so the show, the season one audio comedy, fantasy comedy, has won a few different awards. How did you get in the space to receive an award? Did you go to like expos, conventions? How did you?
I'm actually a part of the Audio Publishers Association. They give me like newsletters. They give me some job opportunities on occasion where they're like, "Hey, we're looking for some sound designers for this or something like that," and they all get connected and stuff. And every year they have an audiobook award ceremony, and I submitted that. Put a little bit of money down. Made a bunch of USB drives. Sent it off to them, and they were like, "This is fantastic." So they nominated us and invited us to go to this wonderful ceremony in New York, where we got to meet a lot of incredible people. I got to meet LeVar Burton and Patton Oswalt, showcase some of my work to some of them. And it's a lot of those award ceremonies, usually what they want you to do is they'll like have you submit and be like, well, decide what category you want to enter in for and all that. Usually a lot of award ceremonies don't pick all of their entries. Like they don't like just find some entry out in the willy-nilly and be like, okay, we're nominating that. Usually you'll end up having to submit. Like even in the Academy Awards, those films have to submit and put money down to get in.
Yeah. Wow.
Barring the qualifications and also trying to make a good thing out of it.
So have you put any thought into doing the Comic-Con route or getting booth space, or
I have thought about it. I want to do it, but we're kind of unknown still. We've only got maybe a couple hundred people total that have even heard of us, let alone talk about us. Like I know that a lot of the podcasting community, like they know of us. I've spoken a bit with quite a few people. I've done a lot of table reads with people and like given them notes on and feedback on voice acting and other things like that. But I told myself I would need to get myself at a certain threshold before I felt competent and comfortable enough to do the Comic-Con route. I'd love to do panels, like that'd be fun, but like even just having a booth, I need to have enough people being like, okay, I would love to see that. I'd love to see some merchandise. I'd love to see some other things.
Yeah. What is the budget for a season, a full season? What is that?
Well, my budget for season one started around 25 grand.
Okay.
And the reason why is that like we are much more expensive than your average audio drama. And the reason why is because of the sound design. I have professional actors all doing their thing. None of them are like we only had like one amateur in the whole team, and you'll probably guess who that is. But we doubled down in getting everything that we needed out the gate, and we worked really hard to make it sound as close to a theatrical production as we could.
Mm.
It's very rare to hear the quality of Magus Elgar in other stuff. Like, someone actually once described Magus Elgar as like the Michael Bay of audio dramas in terms of just sheer production value.
Mhm.
I assume that he was probably saying that he might have been talking about my writing, in which case that was more of an insult than a compliment.
I was gonna say that I actually thought that it was better than some of the stuff that Rooster Teeth does. I was like, this is like highly competitive, maybe even better than what Rooster Teeth is doing over there.
Is Rooster Teeth doing audio dramas?
They do what I mean is animation.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if they specifically do audio dramas, but they do podcasts. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of them, they do like talk shows and
story-based podcasts
like for theirs. Because I know that they've got like a lot of machinima, and their machinima is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And now they've started doing like their own CG work outside of machinima, and that's been pretty great.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of their writing is very takes heavy inspiration from a lot of stuff before it, like anime and other things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still very engaging to listen to, to watch. But yeah, my particular brand of sound design is my own particular flavor, where a lot of the sound effects that I make, 80% of Magus Elgar is all Foley.
I was gonna say, yeah.
A lot of the sound effects that I've created were based on Foley that I ended up playing around with and adjusting to make the noises and sound effects and stuff that they had. Like, I remember Dragon in Kadale was one of those few characters where we had like all these dragon sound effects that we had to make. And maybe about 30 or 40% of it was from a library, but there's like about 15 separate sound files all playing at once to try and make the right kind of effect we're going for.
Yeah.
You can actually hear that in like video games like Monster Hunter World, where you actually can like hear the small parts of like all the monster that they're constructing. Like, what was it? Like, there's one creature in that's like a cross between a chicken, a pigeon, and a dinosaur. That they all mix together in like little pieces, and that's similar to the kind of thing that I do for a lot of my sound design. Is that I break apart the base elements of what I want and construct it slowly, and then when it's combined, it sounds like a wholly unique sound.
Yeah.
Probably one of I'm working on a sound design for a sci-fi called The Sojourn right now, and they wanted me to come up with this sound of this alien vessel cutting through a ship. And I actually combined the sound of a crying baby and stretched it out, played around with the waveform and stuff to the point where it sounds like, as it's charging up, it sounds like this baby shriek before it cuts into this thing. And they loved it so much, they said, yeah, we're rewriting the story to accommodate for the fact that it sounds like that, because that is psychologically tormenting.
Yeah, that's definitely, in the top of the strengths, and it's equal to acting and storytelling for sure of Magus Elgar is that sound design. It's unique, it's different, it's very cinematic. From just listening to the first three, it was something that extremely stood out.
Yeah, and regrettably, if we end up doing a season 2, it's going to be a little more expensive.
Yeah.
A lot of these people that were doing this project were working for very little. Like, the voice actors were getting paid very well. I wanted to make sure of that, and their rates are probably going to change a little bit, considering that some of them are big name voice actors now. Like I know Kellen is voicing one of the main villains in My Hero Academia now.
Oh wow, okay.
And I want him back, but he's going to be more expensive. I know that Brian Stavali, who played Victus and Got Ironball, who are two of my favorite characters. I'm going to have to do some things to get him back for like in terms of like getting the money for it. And not to mention, I do have my day job. I've got more writers. I've got about 3 other writers working with me. I've got Melody Gun Productions really wanting to come in and add a lot more of their presence to it this time around, because I pretty much did almost all of the sound design. And this time around, they want to be like, well, we would love to do more sound work for this and get this out faster. But again, if we do all of that, the budget is going to go up, and we're going to have to find some investors who are legitimately interested in seeing where the story is going. And I can tell you, we've got interesting ideas on what we want to do with this.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine. For those of you who's just turning into the live stream and watching the feed, if you have any questions, we'll do some Q&A at the end of this end of this cast. For any questions you guys got. So something else that was on my mind that I was thinking was, does this world potentially develop into a video game or a tabletop game, or has that ever crossed your mind at all?
It has. As you probably can see by the books over here, I have a lot of I actually have a lot of these books are actually tabletop books. Something that I do as a way to make, monetize my time is I actually almost all of my RPGs that I write myself, I use to workshop into future productions.
Okay.
For example, one of the oldest running campaigns that I have that I'm trying to develop into a full series. I don't know if it's going to be a book or an audio drama or what, but it's a Lovecraftian horror called The Quizzical Capstones of Octon Frobachobi. And it took me 6 years to develop to go through this campaign with them, and we're restarting it now because a couple of people have had to move away and other things like that. And I'm planning on trying to make that into something. Magus Elgar had a similar kind of birth where it came from like a storyline where I had a character who was like this very effete spellcaster who was just more excited about being part of the casting rather than anything serious that was going on. And that eventually kind of turned into Magus Elgar. As for like a game, I imagine this would go pretty well if it was like a role-playing game, if it was like an RPG or maybe like some kind of story-driven beat 'em up or something like that. I don't know. Like I when I think of it too, I kind of think of like this one game called Lichdom Battle Mage, where it was this game where you were a caster that had no limitations to your casting abilities. You built spells as you were going out and doing stuff, and that would be a really fun gameplay element to toy around with, considering that a lot of how magic works in the world of Hearth is about insulting the elements and channeling that into energy.
Yeah. What you talk about inspirations. What were some of the things that is there anything that crossed over from other stories into your storyline? Do you use any other pieces?
I know that I took a little bit of inspiration from Avatar: The Last Airbender way back when.
Okay.
And even like very few pages of The Legend of Korra. I know that I take heavy inspiration from Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, as well as Neil Gaiman's Stardust.
Okay.
Where I love a fantasy setting that is very light,
Mm-hmm.
It does have a little bit of its lore, but it's not too dense for you to get into. Like one minor criticism I've always had about Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings is that a lot of the lore of that setting
Mm-hmm.
feels like I'm trying to relearn history, and I don't find it all nearly as engaging personally. Which is why I like Terry Pratchett stuff so much. Is that even his small anecdotes and asides are amusing.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like reading the footnotes in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or something like that, where even just the little bits about them talking about God or how a babblefish works is just wholly engaging because it's just a very unique concept that is engrossing to this world, to this setting.
Mm-hmm. You just a little bit off topic here. You brought up Neil Gaiman. Have you had a chance to see the new series Omen? Yeah, have you seen it?
Yes, I've seen it, and it's fantastic. What it was really telling about it was Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett had a relationship similar to Steven Spielberg and Stanley Kubrick, in that they both wholly respected one another. And Good Omens was their collaboration that they got to do on the side that was so complete and integrated that neither of them can really tell when one of them starts and the other one ends.
Mm-hmm.
And when Terry Pratchett passed away, he told Neil Gaiman that he wanted him to do a proper adaptation of this book.
Mm-hmm.
It deserved it, and don't let the people muck it up. And Neil Gaiman and Terry had been trying to make this for years, but every time that they would get close to getting greenlit, the producers would be like, "This is too silly," or "We want to remove this," or "We don't want this particular dynamic." But now that Neil Gaiman has all the money in the world and all of the clout, because he's got like 6 shows in syndication right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he made let's see, there's Coraline, there's Lucifer, there's Sandman, which is in production, American Gods, Stardust was a successful film that he wrote, and now Good Omens.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm forgetting one, but the point is that now that he had the chance to make this the way that he wanted, he had one objective, and that was to make sure that Good Omens was as close to what Terry wanted as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there were some tiny bits that got removed from it. Like, I know that there was this one particular anecdote in the book where an octopus takes over a police car, or maybe a squid. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah.
That unfortunately didn't make it through the chopping block, but still, they added some extra things. Like Neil Gaiman added up some extra stories, like how Aziraphale and Crowley had their relationship throughout millennia, which was really entertaining and very Monty Python-esque.
Yeah.
Though it's kind of funny because I've been hearing a little bits and pieces about Good Omens, and probably my favorite thing was I saw on one of the early scripts a side note that Neil Gaiman had wrote, where in the book it says the plants trembled in fear, and he writes in handwriting, says, "No, I don't know how we're going to translate this to film."
No, that's a really good scene from the series too. It's a story that I mean, the way that it's told cinematically or through visuals is it breathes into the story. It doesn't take away from the story, I feel like. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. Something I guess that it reminded me of another question for you is that what is you talked about you might want to go with new distribution or whatnot for your second season or for the animation. You didn't suggest, but like, what does that look like for you? Is that like the festival route, or is that the online distribution OTT, or
Well,
like?
I originally packaged this as an audiobook in the hopes of being able to get returns.
Mhm.
to get back the money that I sank into it. But
Yeah.
in order for that to happen, in order for me to get back the money that I had put into it, I would have had to sell over 500,000 copies.
Mhm.
It's just not going to happen. Because something I hadn't anticipated was when you go into the audiobooks, Audible, iTunes, all of those things, they take like 75% of
Mhm.
everything.
Mhm.
And with my distribution, I went with the Authors Republic, and they distributed it at they take like a small percentage of that. So like for every $8 that I sold Magus Elgar as an audiobook, I made $1, maybe 50 cents on it. It was at a point where I was just like, this is not working. I'm never going to be able to get my return, and I'm restricting people from being able to enjoy it. So I had to find another way to get this going. Like I really do want to tell this story, but I also kind of need to put food on my table.
Yeah.
Because most podcasters are usually doing this as like just for fun, or like for a hobby,
Yeah.
and they've got other means of monetization to their lives. Like they've got their day jobs, they've got other projects, but this is what I do. This is my strength,
Mhm.
and doing a half-assed version of what I do, I cannot justify. If I'm gonna do this, I want to put my absolute all into it. But that's expensive.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time. Um, but I'm working right now on trying to release Magus Elgar season 1 as a proper podcast. Um, I'm talking about the idea of some people doing like advertisement monetization. I don't like that very much, but I know that that's kind of a necessary evil. I'm also thinking about trying to set up merchandise like T-shirts or little
Mhm.
statuettes or little things like that. I have an idea for like a KK plushie,
Mhm.
which would be fun. Which would be fun. As horrific of an abomination that thing is.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, the platform would be, if I ever did a season 2, I'd want to release it as a podcast, similar to similar to what most people do. But I'd probably still offer like a high quality version of the production for everybody to enjoy. Um, Outside of that, because I know that like if you go to Bandcamp, you can get the high quality wave files of these recordings, and they sound like really deep. They're very rich.
Mhm.
Whereas like podcasts, we have limitations. We can only like release them as MP3s. And if you're not like an audiophile like I am, that's fine. It's not a big deal. But it's a good way to show your support for the show and say that I'd like to see more.
You don't see this as a as an you want to see it as a free distribution on podcasts?
I, I'd
Or
like I'd like to distribute it as a free podcast while also offering like the audiobook version, which has like the full quality of everything available, along with some other features, maybe also a soundtrack, because we offer the soundtrack for season 1 on Bandcamp.
Mhm.
We also include like little bloopers and sound effects that you can use for your own stuff if
Okay.
you want to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, so do you think you'll, with season 2, or even season 3, if we're looking ahead of season 2, are you thinking about distributing through Amazon, through Spotify, uh,
Um,
Google Play,
well, the
as
thing is,
an audio, or through something else?
I might do both. Like distributing through Authors Republic, they release it on everything. They release it on everything from Audible to iTunes to Downpour to everything.
Okay.
We still have our store with Bandcamp, which has the regular edition, the fancy edition,
Hmm.
and the soundtrack. Mostly is kind of like like an unofficial tip jar or of some kind, of being like, hey, I really like your show, because we're actually going to be distributing season 1 for free soon.
Okay.
working on that right now, and that's going to be on everything.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm sick of limiting the people that could enjoy this show by having some kind of paywall or other things like that I had to put up out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, I just want to show off the show, and if people like it, they'll ask for me to try and make more, and I would love to make more. I just that does cost money. I can't expect all of these really professional actors and really professional sound designers and absolutely spectacularly talented writers to do it for free.
Mm-hmm. Have you considered Indiegogo crowdfunding platforms?
I have, but the one thing that's been holding me back about it is, for one, I need to actually have season 2 written out. The other thing is that for like an animated series, that is just the tip of the iceberg. I am not going to get the kind of money that like Critical Role got, where they just wanted like what, 60,000 to make a little crummy animated short. They got $8 million or something like that. I don't know how much.
Yeah.
But I know I don't have that kind of clout, and I also know that audio dramas would have a bit of a challenge getting that kind of funding,
Mm-hmm.
unless you have a very, very well-known fan base.
Mm-hmm.
I also need to find some kind of like incentive to give rewards for like people that want to put more money into it.
Yeah.
Which I don't know what I could offer aside from like just like more of the things that I do.
Yeah. So your day-to-day job is Melody Gun, right?
I used to be Melody. I used to work for Melody Gun regularly as a sound editor.
Okay.
But now I work freelance on my own with my own company, Gale Dramatis LLC,
Okay.
where I produce audio content, I edit, I voice act, and I do pretty much a little bit of everything. Right now, I'm working on a feature-length movie. I'm sound designing a sci-fi audio drama. I'm just doing the sound design. It's not my writing, but it is a production that I have a lot of respect for.
Yeah.
I'm currently sound designing a cartoon that I wish I could have written, but is definitely in a different kind of field of humor that I'm very much engrossed by, called Satina. And down the road, I'm probably going to be working on a couple of more things, because I know I'm going to be working with Sojourn for like 12 episodes, and that's going to last me a good while. That's going to last me a couple of months.
Mm. And for those of us, I don't know what Sojourn is. What is Sojourn?
Sojourn is a sci-fi audio drama made by Space Doc. They just got their Kickstarter finished. It's about the Guinevere traveling to the Tantalus cluster and finding a hostile alien race that don't want them to colonize in their area, but their colonies are becoming so bereft of supplies that they're now having like food riots and other things like that, and just desperate to find more resources.
So for if there's someone who's listening to this and they're searching for someone who's an audio engineer, a sound designer, someone like that, where would they go to? Are you on Fiverr? Are you on some sort of marketplace where they can reach out to you directly? How did you end up with these gigs?
You're gonna laugh. I went to them and I asked.
That is
when Space Talk was getting their Kickstarter done, I walked up and said, "Hey, do you guys need a sound designer?" They're like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, like I could do sound design for your thing. Send us a sample of your work." I sent them Magus Elgar, and they're like, "Fine,
yeah.
I guess."
Yeah.
Satina, same thing. I walked up to them and say, "Do you need a sound designer?" They're like, "Yeah, actually, we would love that." I'm like, "Well, here's some of my work." "Oh, this is fantastic."
Yeah.
I've got my own personal website for my stuff. Like it's kennedyphillips.org. You can see all the work that I've done, and I've done a lot.
Mhm.
But like for a lot of those websites, like mostly I just find job boards like those typical ones like Monster or Glassdoor or any of those. And I
Okay.
get emails regularly being like, "Hey, this guy's got a job opening." I haven't considered actually signing up to Fiverr.
Yeah,
I
some of
might do.
those websites like that are super resourceful. I know I use it sometimes for jobs that I can't get done myself very fast.
Mhm.
I use those websites for social media editing or management or something like that. Sending over a piece of content that I have a structure for, and then I get pretty good products out of what the sellers on Fiverr provide. Also, Freelancer or um, another one I use, Upwork. I think those are,
Upwork's a pretty good one, yeah.
yeah. So those that's some stuff right there. Someone did mention in the comments about merchandise. You brought it up. What's the plan there? Do you see yourself doing some sort of apparel? I know I brought up tabletop game, creating some sort of thing like that. Like, what's the ETA or like what's that look like?
Well, right now I need more people to say I would love to see some merchandise.
Mm-hmm.
Um if I get a certain threshold of people saying like clamoring for this,
Mm-hmm.
I can put down a couple of thousand to start like a merchandising run because I want to do more than just like going to like a t-shirt website and being like, here's the logo of the show, yay. I'd actually like to do something a little bit more involved. Like one thing I would love to do is have shirts and other trinkets that have the different symbols of the show.
Mm-hmm.
We have more than just the Magus Elgar logo, which is
Yeah.
the element of discovery with a scalpel stabbing through it. We also have the Ministry of Casters and the symbol for sorcery, the symbol for magus, and the symbol for wizardry.
Mm-hmm.
Because each caster has their own particular brand of magic and how they go about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine most people would be like, well, I'm a magus, or I'm a wizard, or I'm a sorcerer. And they would want to wear a t shirt that represents that, like have that symbol and it says, I am a sorcerer, I am a magus.
Yeah.
And then have like the logo on the back of Magus Elgar and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
Um, or even like have like a nice witty line or something on the front about each of them. Um, we're also thinking about pins. We're thinking about like little tiny minis or something of some of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe like one thing in particular that I know I want to do is I want to sell posters of all of the episode artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, our artist Oskar Mazambakov is crazy talented, and
Mm.
almost every piece of his work I would want to have hanging up in my room. In fact, I do actually. If you look over here, you can actually see the poster for Magus Elgar is being hung up on the side here.
Yeah. So for those of you guys who's listening, uh, Kennedy just showed us a poster of Magus Elgar. It's really cool. It's like there's like a scenic background and kind of like a movie poster esque type thing going on. Yeah,
Yeah.
very nice. Definitely, I think people would really appreciate having something from the story, to kind of reminisce when they when they remind themselves about the story.
It's kind of funny because we've got like two distinct art styles for the show now.
Mhm.
Because when we started with Oscott, he made like this poster art and episode art of these characters, which is it's like this more traditional epic fantasy kind of feel to it. And
It's
now that
more 3D, isn't it?
no, not 3D. It's just they're more like paintings. They're
Yeah,
look like gorgeous paintings.
yeah,
But but like the animated series now has a completely different art style.
yeah.
It's much more economic. It's much more cartoony and a lot more in tone with what the kind of thing that we're doing is.
Hmm.
But it's still like pretty. pretty unique in that right that we have these two different styles that are kind of competing with each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kennedy, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. If you want to, for the audio listeners here, if you want to promote some of your social medias, and also maybe at this last part again, where they can get the full season 1 of Magus Elgar.
Well, you could find me on. Well, thanks for listening. For one, if you want to talk to me or the Magus Elgar team, I'm on Facebook. If you look up the Magus Elgar page, it's Maguselgar. It's not Magnus because that's very easily. That's like one of the most common misspellings about it. We're also on YouTube. We have an Instagram at Magaserling, MAGUSSERLING.
You also have Magus Elgar on.
We do also have a Magus Elgar Instagram. I'm not very frequent on that one because I'm terrible with the social medias. We're also on Twitter at Magus Elgar. Mm-hmm. You can also visit maguselgar.com for a list of all the places that you can get Magus Elgar. We're working on distributing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the others within the next week or two. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But if you don't want to wait for that, we are on a new podcast. All 11 episodes are there. The first 3 episodes are on YouTube for free. And if you want to support us, we're available on iTunes, Bandcamp, Audible, and all sorts of things. The best way to get Magus Elgar DRM free is by going to Bandcamp, store.maguselgar.com, where you can pick up a copy of the show and share it with your friends if you want to. Or, just send them a link, because that would be very respectful of you and prove that you are the Halcyon of intelligence and class.
You guys don't have a Patreon?
We do not.
Okay.
Patreon usually requires regular posting, and we are a mini-series. Our work is slow, but very densely packed with content and high-quality stuff. If I ever do a Patreon, I will let people know. The only way you can find out about that would be to watch our social media stuff or sign up for a newsletter on maguselgar.com. I don't send emails out very often. If I do, it's usually like really important stuff, mm-hmm. or like really, really dramatic changes to how Magus Elgar is running.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, once again, thank you very much for coming on the show. I've learned a whole lot more than I ever thought about Magus Elgar. I hope that I can't wait to see what comes from the animation, the full animation of a season 1. Sorry, it's not going to be the same, but of a season 1, and I can't wait to hear season 2.
Yeah. And if you guys really want to see more of Magus Elgar, honestly, the best way to do it is show your friends, engage with us, ask for stuff. Like I would love to make stuff for you. I just I need to know you exist.
Absolutely. So for you guys, those listening, thank you for tuning in, and those on the live stream, we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye-bye.